Thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight we are going to start on the book of Esther. The book of Esther begins in or around 483 BC, 103 years after Nebuchadnezzar had taken the Jews into captivity. Now I am going to do the book of Esther to include the apocrypha. There are 6 additions to the book of Esther that were removed after 1534. Before 1534, it was illegal not to have the apocrypha included into the King James Version of the Bible. But after 1534, it became legal to remove the apocrypha from the Bible, and it was expensive back then to print versions of the Bible. So things that they didn't think were important, they removed from the book of the Bible. And there are 6 passages that were removed from the book of Esther. These are the 6 additions to the book of Esther that were removed after 1534, when it was no longer illegal to leave the apocrypha in the Bible. These 6 additions begin with Mordecai's dream. In the modern King James, Mordecai's dream is left out. However, in the Apocrypha, the book begins with Mordecai's dream. Also, in the King James Version of modern times, God is never mentioned. But in the Apocrypha version, God is mentioned several times. The Apocrypha begins with a guy named Mordecai who was a captive that Nebuchadnezzar had carried from Jerusalem. Mordecai has a dream where he hears a voice and a noise, thunder and earthquakes beneath and upon the earth. Then 2 great serpents came out, both ready for conflict. Both of them were prepared for battle. This was, and then it turned into darkness and blackness, suffering and anguish. The righteous nation was troubled, fearing their own affliction. They prepared to die. And cried out to God. Then something like a great river from a little spring with much water came from their cry. The serpent represents the nations. The little spring is Esther. The great river is the king marrying Esther and she becoming queen. The nation that prepared to fight were the natives that gathered to destroy the Jews. The nation that prepared to die was Israel. They cried out to God and he saved them. Because Mordecai's dream disturbed him and he desired by all means to interpret it, he was quiet and went unnoticed, and was able to hear the conversation between Gabetha and Herai about planning to kill King Ezra. And Mordecai told the king. Then the king commanded Mordecai to serve in the palace and gave him gifts for his service. Okay, so that was the part that was left out. That was Mordecai's dream, and why Mordecai was able to find out what these men had planned about killing the king. And because of the dream that he had, he was, in such deep thought and quiet and not moving that the people that was talking about killing the king didn't even notice him there. Esther lived in the kingdom of Persia. Her parents must have been exiles that chose to stay, even though a crew ordered and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. Many stayed either because they had established themselves or fearful of the dangerous faraway journey back to their homeland. All right, so let's go ahead and actually begin with the book of Esther as it is written as far as the King James Version. The King James Version left out Mordecai's dream, which is what I just read and interpreted. And now the book of Esther, the King James Version, starts with the king and the lavish party that he has. Now it came to pass in the days of Azarias, this is Azarias, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 providences. Azarias, who was also called Xerxes the Great, was Persia's 5th king. As we read chapter 1, we will see he was proud and impulsive. That in those days, when the king Azarias sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace. Shushan was his winter palace where he had his banquet. In the 3rd year of the reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the province being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty, many days, even as 180 days. The celebration lasted for 6 months, because the real purpose was to come together with a battle plan against Greece and to show the king had the means to support the battle. It was a battle to obtain more wealth and power, not a war for survival. And when the days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Persia was a world power, and the king, as the center of the power, was one of the wealthiest in all the world. And when these days, where were white, green, and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beads were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. Persians' king loved to flaunt their wealth. For Persian kings, they loved to flaunt that they were wealthy. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. They drank from gold vessels that were each different from the other. And drinking was according to the law, none did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. They drank and got drunk. Also, Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to the king as Ahasuerus. Vashti, whom was the queen, made a feast for the royal women of the house. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harabona, Bigtha, and Abitha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Harris the king, to bring Vashita, the queen, before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princesses her beauty, for she was fair to look on. I know I butcher these names, but I do the best that I can with them. While he was drunk, Ahasuerus made a rash, half-drunk decision to have Vashti brought to him. We all have made bad decisions when we are not thinking clearly. He wanted to show off her beauty. But the queen, Vashti, refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Vashti refused to parade around for the king and all his drunk all of his drunk male party. This shows that Vashti was a lady of virtue. It was also against Persian culture for a woman to appear around a public gathering of men. She chose to ignore his request, hoping he would come to his senses later. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that know law and judgment. And the next unto him was Kirshin, Sethar, Adamatha, Tarish, Meres, Mersina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat the first in the kingdom. And Merikamin answered before the king and the prince, Vashti the queen has not done wrong in the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the province of the king Ahasuerus. The king was angry and asked advice from his adversaries. All indications would lead you to believe the king was not saved. He never asked God for advice. We need to always seek God for advice and allow him to lead you to whom he wants you to seek advice from. If you talk to God and ask him, whom shall I seek advice from? He will either and ask him, a name will pop into your head, or will give you the advice in your own head. I have done this in my own life, and God has always provided a source. Perhaps the men's thinking is clouded because they have been drinking too, but they gave the king bad advice. When we don't seek God before we make a decision and we get bad advice from others, we can get bad advice and we can act upon bad advice. But they tell the king that the queen hasn't only done wrong to him, but all of the royal men at the gathering. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. When it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti, the queen, to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise, shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contentment and wrath. The advisors are telling the king that once it is known to the wives of the men's party that Vashti, the queen, refused his request, then the wives of the royal party will think they can refuse their husbands as well. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the law of the Persians and the Medians, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. The advisors advised the king to make a decree that the queen be bound from coming to the king, and she no longer be queen, and it all be given to another better than the queen. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. And the saying pleased the king, and the princes and the king did according to the word of the Memucan. The king was probably still drunk and angry, so he liked the idea, and so he made the decree. For a Persian king issued a law, it couldn't be changed. It stood forever. A new law could be made to counteract the old law. For he sent letters into all the king's province, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their languages, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. As a secular king, he made a law and forced the people to comply. This is what an evil king would do. He made a rash decision without thinking from poor advisors. How often do we as Christians make rash decisions out of anger or hurt without really thinking about the consequences of our decisions? We need to pray for wisdom and for God to put a hedge of protection around us and our families. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I look forward to going over chapter 2 with you as well. Each time that the apocrypha, that the King James Version leaves out something that is in the apocrypha through these chapters of Esther, I will let you know, and I will break it down the best that I know. I hope you have a great evening. May God bless and protect you until we speak again.